Welcome back, Hollyans. We got a special one here for you today. My daughter wanted me to review the critically acclaimed. How many Oscars did this thing win? I don't even know. So many. We're reviewing Twilight. As always, my name is Joe, joined by my indomitable co-host Ryan, and we're gonna give it to you on this one. We're gonna really we're gonna force it in there and make sure you like it. So Ryan,
boy,
what do you think of Twilight? You have quite the history with Twilight from what you've told me. With
I do
growing up in high school and girls and books, and so you're quite the little expert.
Yes, some friends that I had, female friends that I had in high school, did at some point somehow end up talking to my mother and telling her that I should read these books. So she bought them all for me when I was young and impressionable, and so I read them all.
Like any good mother trying to get her son some booty. That's obviously what mothers are for. Well done, Mom. All right.
But yeah, I read all the books because even when they're bad, I still read books. Like some of the best books I've ever read were we used to do these little family like game night things.
Okay.
And my mom would, like, some of the cousins would come over and stuff like that, and like she would give away these little prizes to the winner. And it was usually just little stuff from like the dollar store or whatever.
Right, sure.
Like just small little things to make it kind of fun. And like a lot of I would get books a lot of the time, and some of them were really, really good. Like really interesting, creative sci-fi stuff.
Okay.
Like that's really all I like, is cheap sci-fi. Spy novels sometimes. But these I remember being pretty decent, actually. I remember them being very much like a girl's fantasy, but like there being a lot to them that made them pretty enjoyable. I also remember when the movies were announced, wondering how they were going to do it, because so much of the book or the books are psychological. It's like, what is with this guy acting this weird way? Why does he look this way when I walk by? You know, why is this is a weird family? What's going on there? Like, I don't really like this person that I'm hanging out. Like, so much of it is internal monologue and her feelings about stuff. And the answer to that question, how are they going to do this, is not well.
What you just mentioned was one of the first things I noticed. Was the very first thing I wrote down is I didn't realize that this story was going to be told from Bella's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
She's like giving monologue about stuff, and it's not just, you watch a movie and it's just you're watching the movie, but this is her actually kind of inner monologuing, and you're hearing what she's thinking, stuff like that. And it's very much a story coming. Very much a story coming from her perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was a movie, or not a movie, sorry. There was a book that either was supposed to come out or maybe it did come out. They teased like a chapter of it years and years ago. It was called Midnight Sun, and it was a retelling of Twilight from Edward's perspective.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, that was one of the things. It's like you're learning stuff as Bella learns it. You're not watching the little montage of her Googling stuff on her black polycarbonate MacBook that looks just like the one I had back then, or whatever else, like, and going to the little bookstore, buying the book, and then I don't recall a scene where she reads the book. She just continues Googling stuff.
Agreed.
But yeah, there's like a lot more. I mean, it's like chapters of her, if I'm remembering it right, of her like figuring out what was going on. And then there's not this ridiculous scene. Like in the book, it's not, she tells him what she thinks he is, and he like leaps into the air and like stands in this weird pose. He's like, I'm a killer, Bella, and like does all this like goofy shit. He's like, okay, if you know what I am, are you sure that you feel the way you do because you do? Or is it because I am designed to attract you? Like that part of it's in there, but it's just done a lot better in the book. I mean, the book's not like a masterpiece.
I mean,
but it's better. There's a lot more room for it to breathe and to do things, and to, it's not just watching this stuff. And so much of it is so badly overacted. Like it's real bad, right?
Yes.
There's almost nothing that feels natural. There's no dialogue that sounds natural. It's worse than a CW show.
It's not great. The the chemistry between Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, there isn't any. Like, it's not, there's no real, I don't feel a connection there. I felt
Mhm.
more of a connection between the two characters, Will Smith and the other co star girl in Gemini Man, and they weren't even romantically involved.
Right.
There was more chemistry between those two characters just being themselves, just being, ex, uh, hitman operative guy and current CIA or whatever operative person. There was more going on there than
Mhm.
there's supposed to be with these two young, hormone raging teenager type characters. So I did not feel that that was very, very good at all. I don't necessarily, having watched it, I don't necessarily think it deserved, at least those two actors didn't necessarily deserve as much garbage as they got for the role. I mean, I thought, like let's take for instance the everybody, what do you mean vampires? Some glittery vampire sparkle in the sunlight. What is this garbage? It's just a different take on the world of vampires
Yeah.
by the author, who I have no idea who the author is. Don't need to know. That doesn't matter. But it's just a different take on that whole world, and I'm
Mhm.
okay with that. I liked the idea that Edward and his family were, as far as the vampire world are concerned, they're like vegetarians because they don't eat people. That's a thing they've chosen not to do.
Right.
I liked that that was part of their family. I thought
I
that
like that
was it.
even one of the other vampires that they encounter is like, "Oh, this is what you're fine. I do not care. I'm out of here."
Right. I don't remember names of particular ones, but the black guy.
Yeah,
He looked like
whatever.
he was in charge of the other two who were
He
with
looked
them.
very 1700s.
Yes.
Like the one
Very much.
he had like the I don't know, that lacy frilly thing like a
Mm-hmm.
French dude back in the day. Yeah.
Puffy shirt.
Yeah.
Puffy shirt.
The puffy shirt and leather jacket.
Yeah, he was okay. So I like that about the family. I thought the dynamic between Bella and her father was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Because I mean she's been gone for so long, and she makes a decision to go here because her mom and her mom's new, minor league baseball player boyfriend. They're going to go off and kind of follow his career, so they're selling their house. So she has to do something. So she goes here and it's really what starts all of this off. So I thought that was, being at one point, I am luckily not now, but being at one point a single father, that's was an interesting dynamic for me to watch. I didn't dislike the father; he was okay, just
Mhm.
trying to reconnect with this daughter who he really didn't know very well because it had been
Yeah.
so many years.
And they did a good job, I think, at characterizing that relationship too by
Mm-hmm.
having it, having that like going to the diner. I mean, they overdid it a little bit
Little
because they
bit.
can't help themselves, but like the waitress being like, "Oh, I remember this thing that you used to get, and your father still has it," and what like Billy or whatever being like, "Oh, it's all your dad's been talking about is you coming home," like,
Mm-hmm.
but he's trying to play it cool.
I didn't realize how little. Oh my god, is it Jacob? Is he the one that's
Yeah,
going to be the werewolf?
yeah,
So we don't know that yet. I mean,
no,
sorry, spoilers for Twilight. I'm sorry about that, guys.
for a 20-year
My
old
my
book, yeah.
apologies, Halligans. So he's introduced really early on in the movie, fairly early on, but nothing as far as any interaction between what I know, thanks to growing up as this was a sensation, and even though I didn't watch any of them, so I know what he's going to be.
Mhm.
Taylor Lautner, the one out of the two main male characters who goes on to do literally nothing in Hollywood anymore. He is done. His career's over.
Hmm.
And you know what? It happens. Fine. You're one hit wonder. I'm sure you're going to make plenty of money on residuals for Twilight
Right.
for many
Hey,
years.
they just made some.
So,
We both just watched it.
right?
We just
So
both
we're
watched
not.
it on a streaming service. So
I'm not. I'm not crying for him. But I expected maybe something in this movie to happen, like to come about, but it didn't, and I was okay. I was like, all right, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
A slow build up to something that's going to mean more later. It almost was enough to make me want to watch the other movies. I'm not going to. Let me just straight up, unless we like have to watch the other ones and go ahead and finish it for this. There's no way I see myself just, oh yeah, I'm gonna click on New Moon or Dark Side of the Moon or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't even know what they are. Whatever they are, I'm not watching. It's fine. But I did enjoy that they didn't just jump into everything. And like I said, you've read the books. I haven't. You mentioned the book being better. I think that's just the way it is in general. I think most times books are just going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like I remember seeing the movie The Count of Monte Cristo, with no, the guy who played Jesus in Passion of the Christ,
Yeah. Yeah, I know who
Caviezel.
you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was really good. Like I liked it a
Jim
lot.
Jim
Jim,
Caviezel.
yeah, was really good. But then years later, I ended up reading, Dumas, the written work of the Count of Monte Cristo, and I understood, having read it, why they made the movie the way they made it. And in my opinion, it's one of the very best translations of a book to a movie, keeping what needed to be kept to turn it into a movie, because there's so much. The book is, it's so detailed, and there's so much going on, and there's so
Yeah.
much more going on in the book than in the movie. You can't
Yeah.
put it all in. You might be able to do a Game of Thrones, throw it into like an HBO series or something like that, and really explore those characters and really go into that world. That might be the way to do something like that now.
Mm-hmm.
But for just a straight, we're going to make an hour and a half, hour 45 ish. It wasn't super long, 2 hours at the most, movie out of that novel that he wrote. It was a really good translation. And this, I never read it. I'm just trying to take it at face value for what it was. And it was a high school romance vampire movie. Um, there were it, some of it was really hard to get through for me, because I don't watch those CW shows. Like I stopped
Missing out.
watching The Flash in the second season because it leaned way too much into CW love story versus I just want to watch The Flash. Like I can't
Yeah.
do it. That's not what I'm interested in. But I made it through this movie. I don't believe it was as bad necessarily off tops as everything I heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
There were definitely some things I took exception with. I thought the very first interaction between Bella and Edward was super weird, and I didn't necessarily enjoy that a whole lot. And I thought the way all the vampires looked in this compared to all the other students, because they were so. I'm sorry, Halligans. If you hear something in the background, that is my stupid cat chasing something on the floor. So it is what it is.
Hmm.
But I didn't think it was that they were distracting by how pale they were. That's the most I could put to it. It was a little bit distracting compared to just watching a normal
Yeah.
high school movie
Well,
kind of a thing.
there were a few scenes where you could tell one of them next to Bella or next to Kristen Stewart that
Mhm.
she was super pale, but they had a bunch of white makeup on.
Right?
They looked like they had really thick, like white powder on.
It did. It was distracting. It was a little distracting. And the thought of, and I know where they were. Was it Seattle? Washington?
It was Washington, yeah, somewhere in
Washington.
Washington.
Washington State. And so real rainy, overcast all the time, like this. And I guess that's where they had to live, because if they're in the sun and they sparkle, and then everybody would know. That
Yeah,
seems
now
that seems like a stretch.
okay, so that was something I really liked in the books.
Okay.
I liked that it's like they don't catch fire in the sun or whatever. That always bugged me. Like it bugged me in a lot of these like reinterpretations where they're much more modern and they have these other things about them, but they keep the can't go out in the sun thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like that they tried to do something else with it. It's not that it'll hurt them; it's that it'll be obvious that there's something different. And
Yeah, I get that.
what I remember from the books is that they described it. It looked like their skin was like translucent, and it was almost like a diamond, crystalline kind of structured. I don't know that it said exactly that he sparkled like he had fairy dust on him or stripper glitter or whatever else you want to say. But I liked that it's like, oh, okay, direct sunlight makes them look a way that something's wrong.
Yeah,
I just like that there's just something about it, like sunlight reveals that there's something up with them. It's almost like in the Pirates movies, that moonlight reveals what the crew really are. It's almost like that. So, and I don't know, there are concepts in the book that are pretty good. I mean, the relationship isn't great. I don't know if they're aiming for like the Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, but that's kind of what it seems like two worlds trying to pull them apart. You know what I mean? And a lot of people,
it's really hard not to make that comparison.
I think people wrongly glorify Romeo and Juliet, because Romeo and Juliet is not a love story. It's a tragedy about two teenagers who were too young to know that their love wasn't worth dying for.
Yes.
And this is kind of the same thing, although they do a lot less to like set up their relationship. It still feels super fast in the book, but it's like real fast in this.
About to say, it felt even faster here.
They meet they go to class together once. He acts weird because he can smell her, and she's like, "What do I smell?" And that was in the books too, but it wasn't. See, I didn't expect, like, that was one of the first things that caught me off guard, was the way he quickly like slapped his hand up to his face and stuff. In the books, it's more of like a subtle, like he's uncomfortable in some way. Like he like has it, he puts his hand near his face. He's uncomfortable. He's like kind of stiffened up.
Okay.
Not like, and just covers his face and is like glaring at her and like shaking and like looking like he's trying real hard to hold in a fart. Like there's a lot of bad acting in that. It's just super weird. And some of his line deliveries, it reminded me of what you told me about American Psycho, that Willem Dafoe delivered the lines in 3 different ways and then they mixed up the takes. Because there are certain parts where he'll say something, it'll go back to her, then it cuts back to him and he says something else really aggressively. Back to her, back to him. He says something like kind of much softer. And it's like, I know that they're using different versions of each line, but it almost seemed in a couple places like they were doing it on purpose, like having his mood shift really quickly by using different versions of that scene. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this could have been really good if it was handled better. If we didn't have the spectacle of him being like, "Hold on, spider monkey," and like climbing up the tree real fast. Oh my God. And that kind of stuff, if it was just like hanging around, like looking at the house, explaining his life, where she's like, "Oh, there's no bed." He's like, "Yeah, I don't sleep."
Mm-hmm. Like, certain that's stuff like that.
Yeah, like, what do you do? He's like, "Clearly I listen to music." Cool. Like, there was just so much that they did that was clearly for the spectacle of it, for the kids who were going to see this movie. And I think if they just did it without kids in mind, if they tried to make it a little bit grittier and more real, the thing we complain about now, it probably would have turned out quite a bit better.
That's entirely possible. I
don't know that
because you mentioned it, I'm going to go ahead and mention it. The special effects in this are horrific. They look so hokey, I think is the best word I can use for it. Like him carrying her up the tree and just the way all of that looked was terrible. Like this movie came out after, let's say, Star Wars Episode 1, when that came out. Pod racing, whole 9 yards, Darth Maul. I remember seeing that movie, and that was the movie that I looked at and said, "Oh, okay. Anything they can imagine, they can put that on screen now. Got it." ILM. I mean, regardless of how you felt about the movie itself, ILM killed it. Like, it looked good. Everything they did was all tight. Everything interacted well, whether it was CGI to people, whatever. It looked good. Like, this was supposed to be a big budget Hollywood movie. It did not look like this was Hawk and Rev level. Only I didn't like it.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I thought of the same thing too. It's like, this is exactly the kind of movie that we talked about. Even when we talked about Hawk and Rev, like there are certain movies that are just terrible and they're hilarious, and it's because they're not in on the joke. And then some movies are like parodies of themselves. And they are in on the joke. And that's what Hawk and Rev is. That is definitely not what this was.
Yeah, so special effect wise, it is what it is, but this movie isn't about that. I can at least there was a couple of moments I saw some stuff and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look great. But that's not what this movie's about. It's not a spectacle for my eyes. It's not really a spectacle for a lot that I have going on. It's not really this movie isn't for me, and that's okay. It's for a young adult audience.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I mean, early, not quite to like tween to early teen kind of thing. Is who's
Yeah.
really gonna be, sucked into something like this. And I think for that, it probably did a more than passable job, especially if there were for an audience if they hadn't read the books. If they just got swept up in this,
Mm-hmm.
they were that age and they went and saw this, they'd probably like it.
Yeah, I mean, for a kid who's in it for the spectacle, I think they maybe had too much money to play with. So they're able to do these weird aerial shots and these kind of like half-assed effects where it's like, oh, let's have them like we'll illustrate speed by having it be like a lower frame rate or something. Like not actually speeding it up, just having it be a lower frame rate. All right, there was one moment that I liked. So Kim said there was a moment that she liked. I forgot what it was though. But there was a moment, like one moment that I remember that I liked. And part of it is that I just like Muse. And they played Supermassive Black Hole, which is Muse, right?
I think so.
Let me look that up before I make a fool of myself. Supermassive Black
You
Hole.
mean
by
before
Muse.
we make bigger fools of ourselves?
Yeah, it is Muse.
Okay.
I haven't heard that song in a long time, but yeah, it's Muse. But it's when Jasper comes up to bat. And he's like he's not like, oh yeah, what like Emmett's doing. He just like comes up, he's kind of just like twirling the bat, and then he does this thing where he like tosses it, just like tips it with his fingers, so the bat comes back around, grabs the handle, hits, and I kind of like the speed ramp that it does. It's like super fast as he swings, and then as soon as the contact is through and his arm is out, it like ramps back down. That scene was okay.
That was an alright scene.
Yeah, there's like 4 seconds of this movie that I was like, well, that's whoever thought of that should have just made the whole thing. Like that I kind of liked. But yeah, it was just this whole thing of like I can't shake the feeling that there's a good movie in there. If they would have just played with it a little bit more, had there be more suspense before she figures out who Edward is or what he is. I don't like the whole thing of him, she's like, you pushed it away, with your hand. He's like, well, nobody's going to believe you. I don't remember that. Like, there's a lot of her, like, what's going on, like, explain how this happened, and him just pretty skillfully deflecting it. Because he's been a vampire since 1918. Like, he has deflected before.
Okay.
The only one part of this that I found excusable, like, really thinking about it, was where he's just, like, kind of going nuts and telling her everything. He's like, Alice can do this, and this person can do that, and I can, rip this tree out of the ground, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you've been around since 1918 and you've never been able to tell anybody about yourself, that's probably super exciting to get to share that with somebody.
Agreed.
Like, I had a weird situation where somebody came into the bar, slowly over the time that she was there, revealed that she was a stripper who was working as like an escort for her high school guidance counselor or something like that. Like, odd thing to do, odd thing to tell me.
Very odd thing to tell you.
And then a little while later, this guy came in who had been in before, who I knew his name, and he looked at me and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I called his name and he said, "Yes, Ryan." And I was like, "I am burdened by so much knowledge, and I must be free of it."
You are burdened by glorious purpose.
I was like, I just have to. I must be free of it. And I told him about it. And he's like, "Oh man," it's like, "What? What?" He's like, "I don't." And then he just like sat down. He's like, "I have to think about this for a little bit."
I don't quite know how to process this information.
Yeah, I was just. So
Okay,
I can see
I
the whole
dig
thing
that.
of like, I need to tell somebody. Like, okay, there's somebody I can talk to. I need to tell somebody like what's going on.
I didn't realize that one of our favorite actresses was in this movie.
Anna Kendrick.
Yep. Apparently, she didn't realize or had forgotten that she was in this movie, thanks to what you told me the other night when we were hanging out.
Yeah.
And she put out that tweet. Oh, I forgot that I was in Twilight. That she's good. I dig her.
Yeah.
Not a big part of this, and that's okay. Didn't need to be. She was just a high school friend. Somebody there. There were some of the interactions between Ed and Bella, and this is, I mean, it really revolves around those two. Like at one point, he's trying to tell her, if you were smart, you'd stay away from me. But the mere act of him going to her and telling her that is really the exact opposite of what you want to have happen.
Right.
Like, it's human nature. Like, if you've been around that long, I feel like you know what human nature is. And human nature is, if you tell me not to do something, well, I kind of immediately want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just want to stay away from me, you'll just stay away from me. And that will be the end of it. And I'll be like, oh, he's just trying to avoid me. And she'll get over it and she'll move on. And then that would be the end of it. But it kind of wasn't. There's a scene they have where they're at a beach. She's not going to do some surfing. Her friends are going to do some surfing. And Jacob is there. And Edward is there. It's like she invited Edward. And Jacob is there. And Jacob's got a couple buddies who were there. And some of the buddies, somebody's talking to her about Edward. And as Edward and her are leaving later, just shortly after that, he's like, she's asking him about it. And he's like, oh, you heard that? What do you mean you heard that? They were talking to her. Like, they were having a conversation with her. Like, what do you mean? Oh, you heard that? Yes. He heard what they were saying about you and your family. Yes.
Yeah. That was that was one of those like super unnatural, like things that I'm sure seemed right in the moment when they were filming all those sequences, out of order.
Oh,
like we have to have something to tie this in. Like, oh, you heard the thing that was said 5 seconds ago that was like 2 feet away from you. But then when you actually mash it together, it's like, oh yeah, we probably didn't need that.
So it's something that kind of bugged me about this is, all right, they've been vampires for all this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Long time. They kind of maybe have a grasp as to how to do it without getting caught, without revealing themselves, especially this family who is choosing not to kill humans for food. Their sustenance isn't human blood. Good on them. All right. Way to be vampire vegans. Good job. The thing that it bugs me in the fact that all this time they can do it, and kind of like you brought up, she's asking him these questions, and he's not deflecting very well. He's been a vampire for over 100 years, and he should know how to deflect humans' questions a little better at this point. And so you're telling me teenage junior girl in high school junior teenage girl figures out that they're all vampires? Mm-hmm. She's the one that figures it out. Like, it didn't build her up before then to be exceptionally smart or clever or intuitive or. Did you hear that?
I did hear that.
That's fantastic. God damn it. But she's not Batman, she's not a detective, and yet this high school girl figures out, oh, I figured it out, you're vampires. Like, she does this modicum of research, like the bare minimum. Oh, I'm curious about this. I heard about this. I'm going to go look it up at this special bookstore. And I'm sorry, nobody to this point has figured out to do this. All this weird stuff. The kids at school who were like, oh yeah, whenever it's sunny days, they're never here. Like, nothing. It's just almost laughable that's how this goes down. They couldn't come up with I hope the book was a little more clever about how that happened than the movie was.
I think it was. There were a lot more encounters, a lot more interactions that they obviously couldn't get into. Like you were talking about with the Count of Monte Cristo. There's just so much that they can't put in there, but they can try to get like the spirit of it in.
I got you. Okay.
So they're like dates that they go on. There's a scene in the book where Bella goes to the movies with Mike, but Edward is also there. Or no, is Edward also there? She ends up going with like two different guys or whatever. Like she thinks they're going as friends, but she realizes at one point like both of them are kind of sitting with their hand in a way that she could easily grab it.
Well,
So
I mean, at
it's
least
like,
it's their hand where she can easily grab, not not the popcorn bucket trick.
Yeah. Now I've lost my train. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot that they have to gloss over, and a lot of time they have to try to cover. But like I said, it's not like high art or anything. But I think they could have done a lot better with this movie than they did. I think if it was remade in a more adult way, it would have worked better. Maybe not great, but better.
I can see that. I think there's several things that we've watched that if done. I said that about the remake of Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
That if they were to go to a darker place, a more gritty, realistic version of it, more adult, that, I mean, I know the audience you're trying to go for, but how about going for the adult audience because they're the ones who have money. They have the disposable income to spend on going to your movie versus just begging my parents to take me to your movie. Like, go for it, and you might be surprised at how well it does. What a scene that I really did enjoy was when Bella first meets his family. It was awkward as hell, and I really enjoyed that about it. That felt very real to me. I mean, this is a super unusual thing for his family to have to deal with. That there's this person who it's a human being, and that's kind of our food, though it's really not. And he's like kind of falling for her, and she's going to be part of this now. And it was a very awkward thing, and I thought they portrayed that pretty well, and I did dig that. And I would have to say that there's a scene in this where she has to hurt her father's feelings in order to progress what's going on in the story. It was probably the most amount of emotion that this actress showed during the entire course of this movie. She was very monotone for most of it. It wasn't much of it. It was hard to take. The back and forth between her and Edward was really hard to take, a lot of it. Even though I didn't really mind Edward in this. I thought Robert Pattinson did an okay job based on what they were asking him to do.
Right. What he had to work with, what I'm sure his like stage direction was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he did the best he could. And I felt like, I don't know, man. Like I keep thinking about the scene where he's acting like he smelled her. And it's like, there's no way that they were like, act like you smelled something bad. And he was doing that. Like all 10's hand clapped over the face, all that stuff. It's like, no, I've never smelled anything that bad. I've smelled horrific things, but I've never just done that.
I mean, okay. And sometimes I think in movies, a director really tells you, no, you have to go farther, really lean into it, things like that. And that could have been a case of that they just wanted it to be what it was, what it ended up being on screen for us, which doesn't necessarily translate into the most appropriate way to get that across.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think that's one of those, like we talked about in the last review when we reviewed Tombstone. Tombstone was a very show, don't tell movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. I think this was a way of, it was show, don't tell, but it was doing it in a way that was more than we needed. It was hitting us over the head with something in a way that it didn't need to do in order to get that point across.
I don't know, man. It just feels riddled with missed opportunities. Like there are a lot of opportunities to turn the stuff that they're telling us into something that they're showing us.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like they blew a lot of their budget and a lot of the runtime on physical gags or Not gags. What am I trying to think of? Like stunts. 'Cause they're not exactly action scenes. They're just like spectacles.
Kind of, yeah.
Like them running around and doing superhuman vampire things, but the effects just aren't. They're not awesome.
Like you had a movie like Blade from many years before this movie came out. Its
Yeah.
special effects it was all about vampires. Its special effects were better than this.
Right.
Some of them, the computer generated stuff doesn't age as well as others, but there are things in it, jumping around, movements, things that he does as a vampire that just aged much better as far as just a general watching experience goes than me watching this much newer movie. Which, even I say newer movie, this movie's what, 10 years old? More than that?
More than that, I'm sure.
Not by that much. Oh my god, how old am I? Oh god, don't do this to me. Don't break me down,
Twilight. Son. Okay, yeah. Well, Twilight came out in 2008. That's a while ago now.
Oh god, that's 14 years. That's almost as old as my daughter. Well, old man
Now
alert.
you
It's
feel
cool.
every.
It's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's totally. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. So I have to talk about the what ends up being, I guess, the antagonist of the movie.
James.
Yeah. So I liked how he was portrayed up until the final confrontation. Like he's this. Every vampire has a skill. That was neat. Each different vampire, like human beings. Some human beings are good at this. Some human beings are good at that. Some are mathematical. Some are athletic. Some are whatever it is. And vampires, the same thing. That was really clever. That was one of the things in this, as far as the world of vampires was concerned, that I really thought was neat. I dug that. And so he's a tracker. That's what he does. And so that whole thing, all of that was fine. I dug that. I dug him being the bad guy. But when it comes down to the fight scene at the end, that was just terrible. I'm sorry. You and I've watched enough movies that if you're going to do that, if you're going to have a confrontation between two supernatural beings, you better make it better than what they did, because this was not good.
I feel like it's a little bit better than a CW show. I've seen some bad stuff, especially on The Flash.
I mean,
although really all the CW like superhero shows have fight scenes where it's just a bunch of people just swinging just randomly. It's like little kids at a rave, just like they don't know what to do with their hands. They just,
you're right.
Yeah. And so this, I mean, at least this didn't do that, but there's a lot of like throwing each other around and then stopping to talk for a second and then like ridiculously over dramatized thing of like Edward pushing James through the floor.
It was not good. It was almost like you knew what's going to happen. Like I like the fact that when James has Bella by herself before anybody else shows up, to save her, and he snaps her leg, like she gets hurt.
Right,
that was great.
Yeah, that gives it a little bit of realism.
Right,
like,
absolutely.
In the middle of a fight between two vampires, a human's going to get messed up.
That is correct, son. So I'm like, oh, okay, all right. But then that happens, and then Ed and James fight, and I was like, that's this is a thing I'm watching now. That's basically where my mind went with this. It was not good. I did not dig it. And then after that, so James biting Bella and just doing that so that she now she's going to become a vampire, which I'm not 100% sure why Edward didn't want that to happen. They don't really go into any detail about the reason behind why he's not okay with that, except for he views himself as a monster. He said it several times. And he didn't want her to become that, I guess.
Yeah, there's there's a really good line from that show I'm sure I brought up before, Moonlight, which was a vampire show. They lasted like one season, starring Alex O'Laughlin back in the day.
I'll take your word for it.
And he's saying something about like you don't get close to people because you can't stand the thought of seeing yourself as a monster in someone else's eyes. Something like that.
Okay.
Like he doesn't want anybody to know like how he has to live, what he has to do. So it's a little bit like that. They don't do a great job of it because he talks about why it's horrible and then how they work around all of it and how they live like super wealthy. Like they explain like where the money comes from, how they live, how they manage to avoid detection. Like all of it is explained. It's like a combination of their different like talents and skills.
Okay. Like explained in the books?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
like,
not
oh, how do
explained
you
in
have
the
all this
movie at
money?
all.
Like
I just assume because his dad's a doctor, they're rich. I don't like that's
in the books they talk about that because Alice can see the future, she can like basically tell like, oh, this company's about to come out with something, we should invest in that or do this.
makes sense.
And she can also see like when something's going to happen that's bad because of that, like, oh, we shouldn't make this investment. Like now that we've decided to make this investment, somebody's going to notice that we're doing this. We need to like lose money on this or whatever.
Okay. All right.
Like they're able to like walk that line between doing really well but not being like super noticeable.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Which you'd have to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would become super apparent.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like it's like when Morty has that like crystal in his head or whatever. And he can see the future, so like he's constantly like guiding himself to the future where he's with Jessica. It's kind of like that. She's like constantly like, nope, don't do that. If we make this decision, like something's going to happen.
Oh my god. Yes, I remember that episode. That's fantastic. Good analogy, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so I get that. They didn't explain it in the movie, and that's fine. One thing I thought, and I brought up Blade because of this. So James bites Bella, and Edward has to save her. That was super reminiscent of Blade. The scene in the first Blade where he needs to bite her to gain blood, to gain his strength back to be able to fight the bad guy, Deacon Frost. It really felt similar to that. Like Ed's dad's like, you're gonna have to stop, otherwise you'll just kill her. But it's gonna be the hardest thing you ever had to do. It just reminded me of what has already been done, and I'm sure that that's how it went down in the book. I'm sure that's how it was written. That James bites her and that he has to save her, and they probably explained more about why and any of that stuff better. But I couldn't help but think of, if that came out in 2008 and Blade came out in the mid to late 90s, 10-plus-year-old movie from Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just,
I hear a lot of cat sneezes.
it is. It's just one.
Did you see me looking
sneezing
around like, what is that?
I know what it is. I hear him. I know who it is. Whatever. But it's just, it was hard for me not to immediately think of that. And that's going to happen in movies. It's kind of like there was the episode of South Park where Simpsons did it because the Simpsons have already done everything. But some of the stuff the Simpsons did was based on stuff that happened in shows way earlier. Honeymooners, I Love Lucy, things that have come around before them. Like, that's how that stuff works. One thing inspires another. But there's a difference between inspiration and just copy pasting what somebody else has done and then saying that, oh, well, I'm doing this for mine now, and you're not going to recognize it because, to be fair, the audience that they put this out there for, none of them have seen Blade. Nope. And that's fine. I get it. Totally good. Their core audience, none of them have seen Blade. And that's okay. Whatever. That is what it is. But I'm an old man. Obviously, we have figured that out through the course of this podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much. But we have seen it. And so when I look at stuff like that, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what happened in this other movie. But the thing that I have the biggest problem with is that the other movie did it better. Now, if you took something out of a movie, but you chose to improve upon it yourself in some way, well, then there's no complaint there. I don't care. You're taking what somebody else did, but you're improving on it. You're like just the idea of the vampires in this, how they're different, how they don't do the same thing as other vampires, how they each have a unique skill, and that all of that is unique to this world. And I dug that.
that is something I hadn't seen before. And when you give me something I haven't seen before, I can kind of get into that. But besides that, there's not a lot for me to want to get into with this movie, which is okay. I'm not its core audience. My daughter, she's closer to its core audience. She might really dig this movie. She
Yeah.
might not worry about things like how goofy the special effects look as they're running up a tree. Like I want to compare it to something. Like I'm thinking of something, and it's like it's one of those things. It's on the tip of my brain, and I just can't get there. Like I'm thinking of something. Maybe the way Rob Schneider ran around in the movie where he's like a manimal and he like does all that stuff, and he's like sometimes he can be a fish, and sometimes he can be a dog, and sometimes he can be like he ran around and did stuff, and it looked kind of like what happened in this movie.
So I just watched Bloodsport the other day.
Yep, I was there for
And
some of it.
yeah, there's like one, like everybody fights in a different style or whatever, but there's
Yep.
like one dude who like part of his thing is he'll like jump up and fight, and then he like drops down on all fours, and he like it's basically like playing Elder Scrolls. He's like rolling around and like doing somersaults and like skittering
Yeah, the
sideways
monkey guy.
on
It was
all
like that's
fours.
the monkey
Yeah.
guy. He was jumped up in trees. He broke coconuts with his hand. Hell yeah.
Yes. Or Oz when he was a werewolf in Buffy. The way he runs
I
on
never
all
watched
fours.
Buffy, but I'll take your word for it.
It's like that all fours running, but up a
Mhm.
hill. Or not up a hill, up a tree.
A hilly tree.
Yeah. Oh my god. No, I was like, no, it's not a hill. It's worse. It's more ridiculous than that. It's a
It
tree.
is more ridiculous. But I mean, there's not a whole lot more I can say about this movie. I couldn't just sit here after having watched it and do nothing but trash it. There were things to it that I thought were clever, that I thought were a good idea, and that's based on the writer having written something that was not terrible. Obviously, good enough that it like he can retire off of it. So good for him or her. I honestly don't know. And enough they turned it into movies, and lots of people like all of it. And I liked the fact that they didn't, as I said, they didn't dive in with any werewolf stuff. There's something going on with them. This Indian tribe. There's something up with them, but you don't get into any of it.
Mhm.
It's only barely hinted at, and that's good storytelling right
Yes.
there.
And that is a part that's out of the books. The fact that there's like something up. There's a reason, like it's again, I think it's handled a little bit differently in the books. I don't remember.
Probably.
But it's still the same thing of like, oh, I would go, but I'm not there. Like that's not the spot to go. And it's just part of the mystery. It's another thing. It's like, okay, he's fast. I never see him eat. He acts funny. He does it like he just won't go to this place.
Yep.
It's another one of the breadcrumbs. I like that.
Mm-hmm. That was well done.
But I like that they. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. I like that they. We complained about the Batman that they're already teasing a Joker or a Joker-like character. Like so many movies, stories, shows, whatever, just like blow all of their mystique, the mysteries, like tension, all that by showing way too much.
Yep.
And it's nice to see that they're not hinting at anything. Like there's no, maybe there is an after the credit scene. I doubt it, but there's nothing where they're like hinting that, ooh, this is going to happen next movie. Like they don't hint at anything.
Nope.
It's basically a complete story on its own. You could just imagine where it goes next.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, well, I mean, that's kind of the end of any complete story. It's like when you have no idea what goes on next. So, like, they saved her, and now they got a life to live together and figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
that was well done by them.
Better,
I can thank them for that.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, it was a good choice to do that way. I would say the worst thing about it. So I named my best moment, which was Jasper doing his thing.
Right.
The worst part was basically any time it was a scene
Ed and Bella were together,
where 75% of the screen was Kristen Stewart's face, and she was asked a question, and she like swallows really hard, and then like bobs her head down, like brushes her hair back, like shakes her head about 4 times, and then like she goes like, or like makes some weird like vocalization and then starts to talk. It's like stop. Like
Like that
some
Michael Jordan meme. Stop it.
get help.
Just stop it. Get help.
Stop. Get help. Yeah. No, it's like somebody told her to do. It's like an AD came out to deliver a message. They're like, "Hey, do this. Act awkward." She's like, "Okay," and then they just never told her to stop. So she just kept doing it for everything that anybody said to her. It's like, "What would you like to drink, dear?" And she's like, "Oh, mellow yellow, please."
And the director like didn't have the heart to be like, no, that was just for one scene.
She's acting a little hard out. You can't stop her.
we can't stop her now. That's I don't know, man. I think that's it for me. You got any besides that? You got any final thoughts for Twilight?
No.
I've
had a very
no.
I had a very stressful day. I am still having a stressful day. This did not help. This was not the relaxing little like break, little oasis in my day that I needed. This was worse because me and Kim are just watching it and she's like, I can't believe this is this bad. And I was like, do you want to keep watching it? And she's like, I'm not going to let you suffer by yourself. I was like, okay. Because
nice.
I was going to just put it on my phone and just have my earbuds in. And I like, you can watch CSI or whatever it is you watch, like, or Bigfoot Hunters or something. Like, I'll watch this. And she's like, no, we're in this together. I had to leave the room for a few minutes. I was like, I'm just going to carry my phone with me and keep watching this while I'm doing this other thing. And I came back and turned it back on the TV and she's like, oh, you made it past the baseball scene. Cool. Like, I got to miss 15 minutes of that.
Okay. Has she seen it before then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she'd seen it a while ago. But yeah, it was one of those things, just like me. It's like, wow, I don't remember it being this bad. But I also wasn't this critical before. And I think a lot of the appeal of the movie came down to people who had read the books and they were like, I wonder how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Like,
I think a lot of book to movie thing is that.
Yeah. Like they describe Edward as being like so like godlike in his appearance. Like young Chris Hemsworth should have played him or something.
Okay.
Like they describe him as being like perfect and muscular and handsome and angular features and blah, blah, blah. Like they used the like Adonis a bunch of times, stuff like that. And then they chose Robert Pattinson, who's, I don't know what he looks like. I don't know if he's good looking or not. Like I can't tell.
Think he's bad. Like he's not bad looking.
No, he's not bad looking, but he's like unconventional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then I remember thinking like, okay, this is a good choice. He looks unconventional. It's hard to argue that he's not the right guy for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought he played the role well. Kristen Stewart wasn't great. She was passable. I mean, it was a high school drama stuff kind of movie, and that's hard to take for me. It's not my thing. But as always, man, this is just it comes down. What are we going to recommend for the millions of hooligans out there listening to us? Is this a watch or not a watch, bro?
I'm going to say that my recommendation is to watch The Count of Monte Cristo with Jim Caviezel.
Well, I
think that was a very good adaptation. I like the cast. I don't remember everybody's name, but you're going to recognize some people. Super good. Isn't what the fuck's his name? Guy.
Yes,
that's the name.
He's good. He's a great bad guy in that.
Yeah, it's Guy Pearce.
Yes, Guy Pearce.
I know it's Guy. It's like I can't think of what it. Yeah, Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce is Ferdinand or Fernand, whatever.
Fernand, yes.
Yeah, it's Henry Cavill was in it.
What?
I didn't realize Henry Cavill was in it.
In what?
In Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh my God! Is he the son?
He played Albert Mondego, and
wow.
Louis,
as soon as you said that, I thought he was really young in that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Luis Guzman from
Luis Guzman.
Yeah, however you're supposed to say his name.
He was fantastic.
from Waiting.
Yeah, he's been in a lot. Luis Guzman
Yeah,
from a
he's
lot.
been in a lot, but Waiting is what I always think of him in, because that was such a
Little
great
Batwing,
movie.
maybe
Yeah,
the brain.
exactly.
Okay, so my recommendation for this movie, for most of you out there, this is an easy not to watch. If you are between the ages of 11 and 16 and you're a girl, yeah, give it a watch. I think you might like it. But otherwise, there's not a lot here to be desired, especially when there's a book out there and you could just read the book.
Yeah,
Not that anybody does that anymore, but to read the book and you get more out of it.
yeah.
Even I'd be interested to read. Not that I'm going to. I got too much on my plate that's already in line to get read. But I would be interested to read the book just to see how it's different, see how much more I got out of it. But otherwise, I think we've talked about as much Twilight as we want to talk.
Yeah, I would say skip it for real. There are better movies to watch. Read the book if you're interested. I mean, watch the movie if you're really interested, but it's not a great thing just on its own.
No.
I think this is a movie that warrants a remake. I would even say do it while you can still do it with the original cast. Like, don't make them in high school or whatever. Make them like young adults. Make them, I don't know, she encounters them at a workplace or something like that. She moves for a job or some stuff.
Okay.
Maybe Charlie's her boss. Something, whatever. Like, switch the roles around, but like reimagine it as something a little bit more serious and show more than tell how she like notices these things about him, like follows him around or whatever, or notices that he's following her. Like, there is that little moment where she wakes up and sees him and then goes to turn on the light and he's not there. And we're kind of left to wonder, like, was he really there? And then when you find out he's a vampire and he can move super fast and he's quiet, like maybe he was really there and it wasn't a dream.
Right.
Like, we see that he admits that he like comes in and like watches her sleep. Like, just very casually, like, oh yeah, for a couple months I've been coming in and watching you sleep. It's fascinating.
I mean, creeper.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be terrible if he came in and watched me sleep. I mean, that would be fascinating, though. It's like, how did you drool a pint of water when I only watched you drink like half a glass of water today? Like, you're becoming dehydrated in your sleep. This is incredible.
It's incredible. I don't even know how to follow that, brother. That's, you know what? Where can they find us? Tell us what you thought, Halligans. Have you seen Twilight? Have you watched all of them? Do we need to watch the next two? It's just two, right? Oh, please tell me it's not more than two.
No, I think did they split the last one into two movies? Oh, God. I have to reach around in such a weird way.
Hey, everybody likes a good reach around.
The way this boom arm is. Yeah, there are 5 movies. Are there really 5 movies? How are there 5 movies?
That's not even what?
Twilight. Were there this many books? Were there 4 books? I thought there were 3. Yeah, there's Twilight.
I sure don't know.
Twilight New Moon, Twilight Eclipse, and then Breaking Dawn. And Breaking Dawn followed the Lord of the Rings thing of splitting it into, or no, not Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings did it with The Hobbit, but that was later. Who did it? It was Harry Potter that did it.
Yeah.
Harry Potter split the last one into
Hollows.
2. They started that. These guys followed it. I really don't think there was enough material there to split that last one.
5. There's 5?
There are 5.
Oh, that's definitely not. Sorry, Halligans. I don't care how much you tweet at me, email Ryan. It's not happening. I'm not watching 5. I know 4 more of these. Nope. Not going to happen, guys. Not going to happen. Unless, like, a whole lot of you ask. And then, I mean, like, how can we say no? I mean, I'm going to want to, but as I said, where are they hitting us up, Ryan?
They can find us on Twitter at MovieHowl, but they can also email us at moviehowl@gmail.com.
Excellent. Do that email thing because I am the worst person in the world to be in charge of Twitter, although I am trying. It's terrible, but, I'm doing my best, my very best with that. I think that's everything for us. This has been this was a movie that we watched and have reviewed for you all. I do hope you enjoyed it. The review, not necessarily the movie. Whether or not you enjoyed the movie, that is up to you because each and every one of us has our own opinions about stuff. If you loved it, I'm glad that you did. If it was everything you ever wanted, more power to you. If you hated it, well, that's cool too.
Yeah.
But this has been a fun one. They're all fun ones because we have fun sitting down talking about movies. And last time I checked, I've been Joe.
I've been Ryan.
And we're out.